From the City of Angels, you are listening to the James Salazar Media Podcast. On today's episode, America has an epidemic of fear. So let me strike the music, and I'll meet you on the other side.
Engage.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Say hello to my little friend.
No, I am your father.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
And welcome to the James Salazar Media Podcast, where you get your dose of pop culture, politics, and futurism. Hope everyone's doing okay. Just came out of Thanksgiving. A lot of good food, a lot of good times, and being thankful for what the Lord has given me and my family. Thankful I live in a place such as the United States of America. I could have drawn the short stick and been born in a much more difficult place. I acknowledge that. So I am thankful. But there's something that we need to talk about today. In America, we have an epidemic of fear. We do. And I'm seeing it everywhere I go. I'm hearing it in every conversation I'm in. I know so many people who are afraid to pull the trigger on their life. They know there's a decision that they have to make, and granted, it is difficult, but they're refusing to make it. They are freezing. They are not going forward. They're not pulling the trigger. They are apprehensive. They're not doing what they know they should do. You know, fear has 3 evolutionary reactions. Number 1, you either fight. Number 2, you take flight. And the other is that you freeze. That you're paralyzed because of fear. Paralyzation by analyzation of the situation and not pulling the trigger. There's so many people who are in relationships that they know need to get out of. And there's so many relationships that people need to commit to. And they're just not making the decisions because they fear the unknown. And I see it everywhere I go. It is sad. And it's frustrating when you talk to these people. You know, I've been hearing people who I respect a lot make this statement, and it's something I've always believed, and is ringing more true to me today than ever before. That love is not the strongest emotion. It's just not. And hate, pretty strong. Love and hate are pretty strong, but they're not the strongest emotions. Fear is the strongest emotion. Fear can get people to do something that they would have never done if they weren't fearful. Fear can make people not make decisions. It can paralyze. It's amazing. It can take people who seem so kind in their heart, but if they get fear, it is amazing what you can get people to do if you get them to fear. It's amazing who you can get people to hate if you connect them to fear. Who you can get them to discriminate. Fear will always be a good idea to the person who wants to hurt someone. It's always a good justification for the person discriminating, but it's not. In real life, it is not. Fear is not a good reason to hate, kill, steal, discriminate. Now, I'm not saying, and let's bring it back to what we're dealing today, and definitely we're seeing fear in the uptick in this new COVID way of life. People are on edge. I talk to people. They got the vaccine and the booster, and they're afraid of little kids who are not affected by it. And their doctors will tell them, stay away from little kids. When they got the vaccine and the booster, it's incredible. And you see on TV, people are willing not to let people go into the hospital, discriminate people who don't make the decisions that they want them to make, and not have them have access to health care, even though they pay for it because they didn't take a vaccine. They want to punish. Like I said, you can get anybody to discriminate and hate and act violently if you connect them to their fear or create a fear in them. Now, I'm not saying these people, it's pretty silly that those non-vaxxers wearing the Star of David comparing themselves to Jews in Auschwitz. Obviously, that's stupid and a bad comparison. But do not be fooled. Small things, big things, have small beginnings. And it was the little poison of fear by Hitler that allowed people and gave people license to do big, terrible things. And that's how it's always worked. That's how it happens in history. And we're not learning from history. You can justify anything for the greater good of the society. And you can get people to vote your way if you make them fearful. I mean, right now in our society, we have this new strain of COVID called Omicron. Now, the lady who found it in Africa said it is more infectious but less deadly. I want you to hear that. More infectious, most likely to infect everybody, but less deadly than Delta and the original coronavirus. But our society right now is looking to close down everything. All flights from Europe because of Omicron. If you do not know, let me tell you, everyone is going to catch one strain or another of COVID. It's going to burn through our society. And if you are in a risk factor, you need to get the vaccine. And if you're still one of those risk factors, and if you got the vaccine, you need to get a booster. Because the original strain that was killing 3,000 people a day at its height, that's still out there. And Delta is out there, which is more infectious and just as bad, is out there. Now we have this new strain. But we know shutdowns don't work. The data's out. It is clear. And our politicians are making knee-jerk reactions because they're not fearing Delta. They're not fearing Omicron. They're not fearing COVID-19. They're not making a decision based on what's best for society. They are fearing losing their job. So they think you, the American people who is gripped with fear, every time you hear something bad, you want the world to shut down. Even when the strain of coronavirus is less deadly. It is at 2% of what it was at its height. We are still to act like it's 100 times worse than at its height. And our politicians, they're not going to make a decision based on what's good for society. And what's good for society is that society is very careful for those who have risk factors and who are of the age where this affects them the most, and have the rest of society keep on moving society through capitalism and commerce and keeping our economy alive, because when the economy dies, people lose jobs, people lose their house, people lose their car, people get kicked out of apartments, people start getting desperate and they start stealing and they start murdering out of desperation. Kids start getting more depressed. Some commit suicide. The factors left over by our dumb politicians are just as deadly, if not more, to our kids' health than COVID-19 is. They're not making the decisions based on logic, what's best for society. They're making the decisions based on fear. Fear of losing their jobs. And they are being pushed into that position to being fear, losing their jobs, based upon your fear of every bad thing in society. It is terrible to hire a politician that runs what's best for society based on consensus and not on logic. And we're seeing it, and we're running into trouble. So how can I bring this into a life lesson? For everyone, if you are waiting for there to be no fear in you, to act in your best interest, to make the decisions that you need to make, my friends, that will never happen. Fear is a signal that something's wrong. And you either can do something about it, fight it, do nothing about it, or run away. But for fear to be gone, for you to make decisions, that's not going to happen. You got to have courage. And courage is not exchanging fear for courage. No, courage is acting in the face of fear. You're never not going to be fearful for the rest of your life. What you need is courage. If you're looking for a world where you're not going to be fearful, where you're not going to be apprehensive about the decisions that you make, my friends, that's never going to happen. and the decisions that you know you need to make, that you thought out, but you're still not acting on them, my friend, you need courage. Because the fear is not going to go away. The worry is not going to go away. You got to make a decision. You got to go on with your life. And I speak into you courage to act in the face of fear. That's what courage is. And what's the opposite of that? If you know what to do and you don't do it because you're fearful, then you're a coward. And you are being a coward. If you can't pull the trigger on your life, you can't make the decisions that you need to make. And the people who act violently against the other people who don't think like them, they're cowards too. And exposing bad traits that when the shit hits the fan, you're going to act terribly. You're going to panic and try to hurt other people because you're a coward. You can't hurt someone because they believe different from you. But you can stand against people who are trying to force you to believe what they believe. We can do that in America without being violent. Some societies you have to fight physically. We're not there. Not yet. And the arguments that need to be won, they need to be won in the arena of ideas. The better argument. And the better argument is what works and produces the results, the intended results that we want. And we're only going to produce the intended results through action. And the only way you're going to act is if you have courage. And you're going to need the courage if you're fearful. So, my friend, I encourage you today. Let's get rid of this epidemic of fear that we're dealing with Americans that's making us act in our most basic nature towards one another. And we're unable to pull the trigger and make the decisions for our lives. Let's act with courage. Let's take a look at that fear and say, fuck off. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have courage. I'm going to look you in the face, fear. And I'm going to do and make the decision that I need to make, regardless of how you're making me fear. I'm going to have courage. I'm going to be courageous. I'm asking you, the listeners of the James Salazar Media Podcast, to be courageous. And don't wait or expect fear to go. Because anything that is new, anything that means change, is going to bring worry and fear. But you are supposed to act in the face of fear with courage. This is why people don't make decisions. This is why people stay in something longer than they ever should. Because they're fearful. And they know what they need to do, but they don't do it. And I'm sorry, my friends, that is cowardice. Don't be a coward. It's not a good word to live with. To know that about yourself. And if you've been that, realize you've been that. And now be courageous. Have courage. And be your own hero at this moment in your life. Conquer that fear because it's not going to go away. You conquer it with courage. Be courageous, my friends. So, my friends, I'm going to end it right here. If the storms of life come against you, stand tall and take a look at that storm and say what my sensei, Jack Burton, always says. Give me your best shot. Strike the music.